You know, there are certain days that will always etch in your memory. The day Kennedy was shot, I remember exactly where I was and what happened, and that was certainly the most momentous day until 9/11.
Just across the Hudson River, just north of the Memphis.
On September 11th, I was in the middle of literally trying to get away from it all.
I was at home, I was in my kitchen.
I had just walked into my apartment after having dropped my 3 kids off at school.
Where the news is being made on this Tuesday, September 11th.
From CNN Center in Atlanta, this is CNN Live at Daybreak.
I was sitting in my office overlooking the newsroom, and the morning meeting was going on.
It was the most routine day. There was virtually no news that day.
Well, it's primary election day in some cities and states. In New York City,
it's going to be a great day.
And we were out covering the New York election.
I was driving down the West Side Highway.
Elsewhere, pretty quiet today. Beautiful weather, Midwest, Northeast.
I was on my way to the Pentagon. I was just pulling into the Pentagon parking lot.
September 11th is my birthday.
I turn on the television. Everybody else is asleep. I see the building. It'll be etched forever. This day changed all of us.
It's on AP, it's Bulletin Crash.
All of a sudden, during the commercial break, everybody started running through the newsroom. And I turned around and I said, wait a minute, what's going on? And one of the vice presidents said, unconfirmed reports of a plane into the World Trade Center.
Okay, full-fledged hard.
30 seconds later, I hear in my earpiece from the control room, get to the set, get to the set. We're going into breaking news. And up comes the picture of the World Trade Center tower with a huge, smoking, gaping hole in it. And I said, holy God. This just in, you were looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story.
My office faces south towards where the Trade Center used to be.
Now, Sean, what can you tell us about what you know?
This is Sean Murtaugh, Vice President of Finance for CNN.
And started with a meeting with the head of our properties group. 2 of us stood up, probably caught the last 5-6 seconds of flight of the first plane flying straight into the to the North Tower.
Oh, shit!
Impact, fireball, and when it hit, it was like a, oh, you got like a, you know, like a thud in your stomach of, did I just see what I just saw?
Sean, what kind of plane? Was it a small plane, a jet?
It was a jet.
You're talking about a large passenger commercial jet.
A large passenger commercial jet.
I thought it could have been an accident. I thought the plane was much smaller. Our shot was from a good distance off. It was when we confirmed that it was in fact a 767 that I realized what we were in for.
We are only now beginning to put together the pieces.
There's a ton of smoke coming out right now.
It is a remarkable scene.
What's about 6, 7 floors were taken out?
I remember that moment in the newsroom when we were looking at the hole caused by the first plane. And people were saying, wow, that's weird. What was that, an accident, a small plane? And somebody said, no, 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 that's no accident.
Wow, the first one, camera's picking up the large fire on the lower floor.
The fire keeps growing, the smoke keeps growing.
As we were driving downtown, we had very little information.
Tragedy unfolding in New York City.
We turned on all news radio and were listening for whatever we could learn.
Paper floating through the air a couple of 100 feet above.
And all the information that was on news radio seemed to be secondhand.
The fire is spreading now.
The first jaw-dropping moment for us was at least a mile or two from the site, because the hole in the north face of the North Tower was many floors wide and many floors high. and you knew if it were a plane, it probably wasn't a Cessna or a stunt plane at that point in time. To us, it just looked like a big fire. You never thought the buildings were going to collapse. You thought the fire was going to be put out. The other thing that happened was people started coming up to us who were eyewitnesses to the incident.
So the plane was slightly on its side, and that's why it made me think maybe it was in distress.
It came in like a spear. It just speared through the building.
Looked at my watch. I'm a little bit late. Holy smoke! The building I'm supposed to be in is on fire.
One thing you saw on the street were rows and rows of people. People just standing, sort of hypnotized by the flames, in disbelief.
Just watching the smoke pour out of here. The papers are still falling from the sky.
When I got outside, I saw everybody was like looking up toward the sky, and I started running downtown toward the building. And I got maybe a block or two before I saw there was a motorist stopped on the corner, so I jumped up to her window and just, waved my CNN ID in her face and said, "Give me a ride, give me a ride." And she let me in the car. I got within a few blocks of the World Trade Center when suddenly there was this second sort of roar that came out of the sky, and everyone just looked right up, and another plane came and just barreled into the other tower. At first I thought, oh, I'm dreaming, I'm going to wake up. This can't be. This doesn't happen. I looked up and the first thing I thought was, my God, that plane is flying so low. In a big city with these tall buildings, what's it doing so low? There was a schoolyard across the street, and I remember there were kids that were being evacuated from the schoolyard. And one of the girls looked up into the sky and she said to her father, "Daddy, look, they're doing it on purpose."
Warming up. Come on, Stretch. Come on.
This was as ordinary a day as you can possibly imagine.
We talk about tax cuts.
You can talk about it at the next event.
The president's schedule was very simple. Sarasota, Florida. Emma Booker Elementary School was the location.
I am going to talk about education, though. Any news?
He was to go there, read a book to some assembled children, give some very general remarks on the importance of reading and education, and fly back to Washington. Couldn't be simpler.
One word. Yes.
Before he goes to sit with the children and to read, he's made aware that the first jetliner has struck the first tower in New York City. His instincts are to think this is not an accident, but nobody knows, and it's a very cautious internal White House reaction. The Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, approaches from his right, leans down, and says the following words: "A second plane has hit the second tower." And with those words, the president now understands the war on terrorism has begun.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
then begins this amazing day-long odyssey across the middle of the country as the president tries to get back to Washington, but is advised it's not safe yet, Mr. President. You need to stay somewhere else.
FLA, this is Air Force One departing Sarasota, Florida.
We need to keep you in a place of maximum security. Air Force One provides that security. And until we're sure about what this is and what the bottom of all this is, don't come back.
I need someone to confirm that the FAA has grounded all planes across the nation.
As soon as the New York airspace, became under attack, the decision was made to shut things down there and ground everything that was in the air immediately. The decision was made very quickly, and it's an unprecedented and very dramatic decision to ground everything in the air over the United States of America. It is stunning. It's amazing to see it happen, to see 4,500 blips over the United States in 60 to 120 minutes time to nothing, just silence in the sky over the U.S.
Fire in the Pentagon. Amy's about to go on there.
I mean, it was like a cruise missile with wings. Went right there and slammed right into the Pentagon. Huge explosion, a great ball of fire, and smoke started billowing out.
There was a voice in the hallway full of running people yelling, "Get out, get out, get out, we've been hit." A fire truck came and started pouring water on the fire, but it was having no effect. I mean, this was an extremely hot, extremely intense fire.
After I determined that there wasn't any more information for me to gather in the office, I left. But before I left, I decided I would try to do one more thing. I tried to take the camera that's mounted in the corner in my office and see if I could put it out in the hallway and point it down the hall toward the side that had been hit. My thought was if the building, God forbid, continued to burn or something happened, that CNN would be able to go to a live picture inside the Pentagon. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough cable.
Secretary Rumsfeld was in his suite of offices on the other side of the building from the impact zone. He felt it, and he immediately was on the attack site within moments, much to the displeasure of his security people, but he did it. And there are pictures of the secretary helping other men carry stretchers of the injured. Security people started screaming at everybody, "Run, run, run. Get away from the building. Run up the highway." Hundreds of people started running up the highway, thinking another plane was headed for them.
We're seeing members of Congress are walking by us here on the sidewalk.
The Senate and the House were both in session that morning, and people started pouring out. And I turned to a guard, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "There's a plane, and it's headed this way." And at that point, we started running.
Stay away from the Capitol, James!
And I remember thinking to myself, how far away do I have to be from the Capitol to not die?
Just go out of the media area of the Capitol, down Pennsylvania Avenue.
I was standing on the sidewalk about 3 blocks away from the Capitol, and all these members of Congress were walking by me. One person I talked to a lot is the spokesman for the Speaker of the House. And I said, "Where's the Speaker?" And he said, "He's not here." And I said, "Well, where is he?" And he said, "He's gone. He's somewhere safe." And that was the first word that we got, that they had evacuated some of the top leaders.
The White House is being evacuated.
It was very clear. All of a sudden, there were Secret Service guys, uniformed, ringing the building.
Everybody out! Let's go! Come on, guys, let's go! Come on, let's go!
No choice, no choice, right now. Cameras up. Equipment stays, it isn't worth your life, go.
They evacuated us across the street.
It's been an explosion at the Pentagon.
And then you started seeing everybody come out.
We saw most of the senior staff come out. The last several hundred I saw leaving the grounds were told and ordered by the Secret Service to run. They were running through the gates.
We're all on our cell phones in Lafayette Park. And I can just remember saying, I need to keep the building in sight.
Walk away from the White House.
Because they kept pushing us back.
There's nothing imminent, but this is just not the place to be.
Go have lunch, do something else, please.
And for the first time in 5 years around the building, saw a Secret Service with automatic rifles. I remember watching people running out the driveway of the White House crying. It was very hard to comprehend what is really happening here.
Did it actually hit the Pentagon?
It's unclear. There's just fire over there.
The tone of the town, did change. It's hard to describe in the sense that it's not something you can grab and put your hands around, but everything was different. Everything was different.
The building's exploding right now. You got people running up the street.
Clear out of here now.
There's a tremendous amount of smoke and flames billowing out of the building.
Well, it is a grotesque sight.
You could see the rush below on the street as people continue to run.
Many of them were inside the building when they felt the explosion, and they say there was just pandemonium.
And here, this just deafening roar of fire engines and police cars. And nobody really knew what had happened other than that something had happened on purpose.
We just started wandering around the city streets. We wound up behind 7 World Trade Center, getting some shots.
It's not safe here. You want to head uptown, you get a shot uptown, but it's not safe here.
Panning the building, showing the smoke, showing the people leaving.
Sorry, I ran that shot.
At this point, we're still shooting flames. I could see above where the plane had gone in, it was really bright red, like coals on a campfire. We would later learn that with the jet fuel, it was about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, shit! Keep going, keep going! Don't hold back, Chris.
The Trade Center is so tall and it looms over you that it looks like you're almost on top of it when you're looking up at it. And you could see these people almost like little specks coming to the glass. And Jim Hubrex, the guy whose apartment I was in, had his camera and he was tightening the shot and tightening the shot. And at one point he finally said, "Oh my God, there's people up there." And some of them were waving what looked to be maybe shirts or jackets out the window, trying to get somebody's attention. I remember his daughter and his wife were there, and they kept remarking that maybe they were waving for help, maybe there was a net, or maybe there was like a helicopter or a plane, and there was some kind of a rescue operation. And then suddenly you saw people one after the other jumping out the window. People were flailing against the wind as they fell, almost as if they'd had second thoughts. It was absolutely horrifying.
Ready, Mo?
There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a cascade of sparks and fire, and now it looks almost like a mushroom cloud explosion. And I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower.
Whole tower just came down.
there was this wall of smoke that just came up over the top of the buildings, good 20, 30 stories tall, like a tidal wave.
Let's go, let's go.
We grabbed the camera off the tripod. And all I could think of at this point in time is the building just collapsed. There's a wall of smoke and debris coming at us. Is there going to be another explosion? Is there going to be gas? Is there chemical in it? And we ran. I was over the edge at that point in time. I had just gotten married in June, and I'm saying to myself, there's so many things in my life that aren't completed, so many open ends. I'm not ready to, sacrifice my life or have my life sacrificed because someone wants to make a statement.
We're okay, the car's stopping, we're okay. We're okay.
It's all closed. Everybody, we're in good shape. Emma's room.
There was this tumbleweed of debris that came at the building. And the building had all glass windows. So as the debris was coming toward me over the tops of everything, the brightness of the sun was just completely blacked out. And it became almost like nighttime. And then there was just silence. And there weren't any more ambulances. You couldn't hear the police cars. You couldn't hear the people on the street anymore. I walked up to the glass and looked out, and it almost looked like a blizzard had hit New York. There was the snow everywhere. And there was just no noise coming from down toward the World Trade Center.
Which way to go? Stay put, stay put.
You're in front of St. Paul's Church on Fulton and Broadway.
Which way to go?
Plane crash in Somerset, Pennsylvania. We don't know if it's a big plane, a small plane, any relation to this.
Plane down in Pennsylvania.
Somerset County?
Right, Somerset County, right.
Yeah, get that map made.
Another plane has crashed, this one about 80 miles south of Pittsburgh.
This is United 93. This took off, was headed for San Francisco. Once again, it flew way out, all the way out toward Ohio, and then took a drastic 180-degree turn, was headed clearly toward Washington, D.C. When the crash happened in Pennsylvania. It's, I think, safe to say, a prominent target in Washington was the goal.
One of the last places you would probably expect to be touched by the violence of an act of terrible terrorism like we have seen today.
What we didn't know at the time was that there were 4 hijackers on board. And according to what we were able to later learn, the hijackers had taken the time to put red bandanas on their head. Armed with box cutters, they were able to take control of the cockpit and take control of the airplane. What they hadn't counted on was people on board making phone calls to their loved ones and to others. They knew then that they were next, and they decided to do something about it. They got together, they discussed it, and this is what really gets me. They voted. They voted to take back the plane. We walk around to the edge of this ridge area, which is about 300 yards from where the crash site was, and I saw smoke rising up out of what looked like a small pit. The plane hit so hard that most of the pieces were crumpled in on top of itself, collapsed right there in that crater. They found the flight data recorder about 15 feet down.
It was extremely loud to the point where it was almost shaking the windows in my house.
Next thing was over the horizon, there was a big, huge fireball. I'd say at least 400 or 500 feet in the air.
I've heard this a number of times, that Shanksville, Pennsylvania is the site of the first victory in the war on terrorism. These passengers, they fought back. The plane did not make it to Washington, and there's no telling how many lives they saved doing it.
There was a big impact with some noise. The floor shook, and we all evacuated.
There have been attacks in 2 American cities, New York and in Washington. The trade centers here in New York have been hit by airplanes. In Washington, there is a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been evacuated. Obviously, we are in the middle of an extraordinary catastrophe. And there's, you can see, perhaps the second tower, the front tower, the top portion of which is collapsing. Good Lord.
I remember saying, oh my God, when the second building came down.
There are no words.
And went silent for a bit and let people watch it. I've been a reporter most of my life. I've seen a lot of bad stuff happen in a lot of difficult places. And I'd never seen anything like this, certainly not in my country. We've been talking about buildings falling, planes hitting, but this isn't about buildings falling and planes hitting. It's about people.
Big explosion happened. Some guy came out, his skin was all off.
There was smoke everywhere and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
I can't even look back. My 6-year-old just last week asked my husband and I to take him to the observation deck, and it's gone. And you know what? Americans will persevere, and I don't think that we'll stoop to the level of these zealot terrorist pigs.
It's about the people who were in those buildings and got out, the people who were in those planes and didn't survive, the people who didn't get out of the building, the firefighters who went. It's a people story.
When I heard some rumbling and shaking, I thought maybe the air conditioner shut off and jumped on again. I turned around, I have a window seat, and the entire sky was filled with, the first thing that struck me, it looked like a ticker tape parade. It was filled with computer paper and then debris. I dropped the phone. And then it was when I was heading down on 27, just about 27, the staircase moved and a crack in the wall appeared, maybe about 6 or 8 inches. And at that point, you know, everybody, I'm sure as they were thinking, you know, get out. This is, you know, anything can happen now.
Nightmare, total blindness, choking feeling. You know, you're covered in dust, rubble, smoke, everything. I dove under a truck.
Everybody, keep moving, please, up the Broadway. Keep moving.
These are people literally running for their lives. People literally trying to get their friends, their co-workers, people they'd never met before, out of those buildings.
Matt Cornelius, you were on the 64th floor, 65th floor?
65th floor.
Tell me what happened.
I was just putting my stuff away, and all of a sudden we heard a loud crash, and the building started shaking, kind of moving like a wave.
I remember talking to a guy who had gotten out, and he talked about coming down and the darkness and the smoke and the screaming and the fear.
We made it pretty fast down to 40th floor, and then from there the smoke got a little bit thick, and it was a lot slower. We maybe made a floor about every 2 minutes. It was packed. I mean, it was a virtual traffic jam.
And I thought, what an incredibly powerful story this is, and there must be thousands of them. Thousands of people who got out, who could stand next to me and tell me the same story, and it would be as compelling the 100th time I heard it as the first time.
Lucky man. I am very lucky. I thank God very much.
By my watch, which isn't exact to everybody else, it was 9:07 when Andy Card leaned over and whispered in the president's ear.
This is Ann Compton with a pool report. I am with the president in Louisiana.
He took the press pool that day, very small traveling set of reporters who were always with the president.
Touchdown?
We were not told where we would land until the time came. We do not know when, where, or how he is going to leave.
That pool went with the president on Air Force One. He flew to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana.
The president has delivered to camera a statement that says that freedom has been attacked, but freedom will be defended.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test.
And then quickly back on the plane. And then they flew to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska because it was a Strategic Air Command center there, an underground bunker.
The president just now coming down the steps of Air Force One, a Secret Service agent following him very closely behind. He salutes to the Air Force officers and gets into a black sedan. We are pulling through the base now. There are armed riflemen blocking some of the roadways, one of them in a kneeling position. There has been protection like this everywhere we've gone since we left Florida this morning.
There is just a little brick building with a door. And the building is basically not much bigger than the door itself. And opens the door and they all go down these stairs, just right down. Because they're going to this underground, fortified, concrete reinforced war command center created for the nightmare of a nuclear attack.
There were only a handful of journalists inside Kabul at that time, and the Taliban had forced us all to live in the Intercontinental Hotel. So we were all sort of gathered on one floor, and people seemed to instinctively come to CNN's office to find out what was happening when this news began to filter out.
The initial assumption was that this had something to do, or at least they were looking into any possible connections with Osama bin Laden.
We were told that the Taliban foreign minister was going to make a press statement, and we said that could he make it in the hotel, because that's something that we wanted to cover live.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks on the United States?
And first of all, he started to say that this was something that the Afghans, that the Taliban had tremendous sympathy for.
We criticize terrorism in all its forms.
He said that he didn't believe that Osama bin Laden could be involved because he said this was far too complex an attack for him, and that this was, you know, he was just a simple man living in Afghanistan at that time.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
No one has blamed or accused him formally.
They wanted to show their sympathies to the world, and they also wanted to say at that point, early on, 4 hours after the attacks, that Osama bin Laden wasn't involved.
Thank you.
Just in the last few seconds, another building, building number 7, one of the buildings in support of the World Trade Center towers, has collapsed. This is no small building, as you can see, at 47 stories. It would stand out in most American cities.
As all this rubble adjusted itself, more buildings came down. The fire consumed more buildings. The structure of the buildings that were there was compromised and kept teetering.
Do you hear that?
Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down soon.
Yet still there were no people coming out of it. And I think that was one of the things that really stayed with me after that, is I kept thinking, well, you know, maybe when everything comes down, more people are going to come out and they're going to rescue more people. But there was just no noise coming from down there. So we kept walking sort of around the disaster area, trudging through this snow-like substance. It's like the interior of this building. There was pieces of their desks and pieces of the photos on their desks and their Rolodexes and documents. See, I found this woman's resume. It was a resume from a kid that had gone to my college who was applying for a job to work in the World Trade Center. It was very much like a weird movie, like, you know, the day after, like a nuclear accident or a nuclear winter. It didn't make any sense. So what do you have now? Do you have a sense of anger? Is it fear? What do you...
Right now, I just hope everybody is safe that can be saved. The people that are dead, well, what can you do for them? Just pray for their loved ones, you know, that's all.
And what about tomorrow?
Tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of people being found in the debris.
Ready to go.
There was a huge part of that day where I became a little bit obsessed with how many people, because we knew that how many people worked in the buildings. We knew that there were thousands. And we knew that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were rescuing them. And there was some point at the day where I stopped doing that, because it just suddenly occurred to me that, God, it didn't really make any difference how many people had died, because every single loss of life was going to be so painful.
Put your mask on. Put your mask on.
I remember one of the first things about Rudy Giuliani.
The situation is that 2 airplanes have attacked, apparently.
One of his first press conferences, somebody asked him about the death toll. He said, "It is going to be more than any of us can bear."
The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
There was absolutely no evasiveness in his language. Giuliani got up and said, "This is as horrible as you can imagine and maybe worse."
We lost the deputy chief of the fire department and the chief of the department. Deputy Commissioner Feehan, Chief Gansey, Father Judge, and Ray Downey, who I just gave a party for at Gracie Mansion for his years of service to the fire department, who led our team in the Oklahoma City bombing rescue. We've also lost him.
What we can tell you tonight is the city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed to be dead, some 85 police officers missing tonight. It was very difficult for anyone to get this information because of the horror everybody was dealing with downtown. You know, the last thing the police and fire department was interested in doing was trying to finalize numbers for us. They were saving lives.
We can only surmise that we are talking in the hundreds, the thousands of people.
I think even those out there who may not believe that there is a God, at a time like this, we all reach out for a higher being.
I remember saying on the air, God rest their souls, because you could only imagine how many people were in there. Of course, we had no way of knowing. I mean, at one point they said something like 10,000 people could be in there. You know, it turned out to be just under 3,000, but, you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, the numbers are just mind-boggling.
This is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my life. The Twin Towers are on the ground level. The destruction is enormous. Enormous. God save our country and what was done to it today.
pointed display of bipartisan unity at this critical moment in U.S. history.
I think it was just off the cuff. Somebody started singing. I think they learned something out of being stuck in the same bunker together for a few hours.
We're told that Air Force One is expected to land in about 15 minutes. We're also told it's being flanked by 3 U.S. Air Force fighter jets.
Occasionally on an international trip or because of weather, you'll look out the window and you'll see a fighter jet go by. A very rare occasion. And when they brought the plane back this time, he was escorted as you see in the movies. One of those moments where there are jets on the wings.
President Bush just landing only a few minutes ago at Andrews Air Force Base, returning to the White House, getting ready to address the nation around 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. Marine One is the helicopter that has the president on board and lands on the south lawn of the White House, which is the routine procedure when the president returns to the White House from Andrews Air Force Base.
Their goal at the moment was almost more than what he said, was to show the president is at the White House. And they feel secure enough that the president can be at the White House. It's psychology, if you will, to the country that the government is there is stability, there's a crisis, but that they're on top of it. Just the picture of the helicopter landing and the president walking in and then the president on television from the White House was meant to convey a message of, they tried to knock our government out, they failed.
Do you want to be angry? Do you want to sort of tap into the country's sense of fury about this and the loss of life? Do you want to try to be reassuring? Do you want to be more calming? And what do you possibly tell the country at the end about what you're going to do and how this is all going to work? These are enormous challenges. This speech has got to be less about fury, less about anger, less about vengeance, less about righteous rage. That was the president's instinct. And the speech basically followed that general format.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
It is almost 22 hours after the unspeakable terrorist incident that has forever changed New York City. Some of the headlines Americans are waking up to this morning. The Daily News proclaiming it is war. The New York Post saying an act of war.
In the area of where the blast occurred from the commercial jetliners, it's like a nuclear winter. Ash, soot piled on top of cars 3 inches deep.
If yesterday was surreal, today is all about reality. Today we're going to start to get a sense of the dimension of this.
We have been successful in recovering at least one other person, and we're in the process of doing everything we can to try to locate other people.
Across America, the hope still goes on that many more people will be rescued from that rubble in New York City and perhaps even at the Pentagon.
It is shortly after 8 o'clock in the morning in Washington, and at 8 o'clock, part of the Pentagon opened up for work.
The Pentagon was insistent that it wanted to show that it was still in operation.
The search is beginning inside now as they try and find out exactly the human tragedy of this catastrophe that has befallen the Pentagon.
All night long, Miles, the dome light on the very top of the Capitol has been burning here. The Congress never officially went out of session. That light.
The light was on, and I remember just that striking me, that it was so symbolic that they left the light on to show that democracy was still okay.
City officials have no idea what kind of reality they confront in the rubble of the World Trade Center.
It was hell down there. It made me sick. It made me sick to my stomach to see it. Then you would turn a corner and you would see these heroic rescue workers. And these people worked 24 hours on, 24 hours off, and they were not going to give up until they were 100% sure that one of their own wasn't left behind.
There were trucks and police cars everywhere you looked. You couldn't move. Streets were closed. There was no place to get food. Nobody was going to work.
The NASDAQ, the Dow Jones closed, all public schools are closed.
I mean, there was no business for anyone to do. And the city was weeping.
The mayor expects the fatality numbers to be horrendous. He calls them, quote, very, very high.
The numbers that we're working on are in the thousands.
We thought this would be like Oklahoma City, where you'd have injuries and amputations to get people out of heaps of debris, but there weren't any. Either you were okay or you were dead, basically.
September 11th certainly opened the eyes of an entire nation. All I remember hearing, apart from the grief, obviously, and the shock, was questions such as, why? Who are these people? Why do they hate us? We want answers. We want to know.
U.S. officials confident that the evidence right now pointing to affiliates or associates of Osama bin Laden.
When it became clear that bin Laden was probably involved and that Afghanistan was at the core of this, we knew Nick Robertson was there.
You can hear me.
And started making plans to go to him.
Certainly, Osama bin Laden is a figurehead, not only in Afghanistan, but in this part of the world. He is somebody that some young followers of Islam might look towards as a particular type of leader that they behold.
The deliberate and deadly attacks which were carried out yesterday against our country were more than acts of terror. They were acts of war.
I think he was very forceful.
Thank you all.
He was clearly in charge. He was shocked, like all of us, and he was angry.
I've just been told that the United States Senate is being evacuated.
What I can tell you is that people are very much on edge here, as there was a suspicious package, and that's why they're evacuating the members of the House.
Come on, come on. Back, please, back.
Don't run, don't panic, don't get hurt, calmly, quickly.
The building here in Midtown Manhattan has been evacuated because of what's being described as an unspecified bomb threat.
Damn terrorists!
All of a sudden, I saw everybody moving off the rooftop, and I said, what's going on?
Move off the block.
And they said, it's a bomb scare.
People in the city, as you can imagine, are enormously tense.
We were living, all of us, in this odd cocktail of fear and rumor and vulnerability.
He called me at 10 to 9 and said, our building has just been hit by a plane.
There was the second plane that came around and slammed into the building.
When he went to work, his mom said goodbye to gave him a big kiss and never saw him again.
And I said, oh God, John, please get out of there safely.
We're at the corner of Lexington and 26th Street in Manhattan. We're at the Armory, where hundreds of families are lined up behind me trying to get information about their missing loved ones. They're asking for all.
When we first arrived there, my producer Miriam Falco and I, we were concerned because we did not want to thrust ourselves at these people.
This woman right here.
We felt very strongly that if they didn't want to talk to us, we didn't want to talk to them, and we weren't going to hound them.
I'm looking for my older nephew.
But in fact, it was the opposite.
We've been here over 2 hours. They told us twice they'd take us next.
They sought us out.
Let me give you. And I have here with me Vinnie Kamaj.
Several different people stand out in my mind from September, and one of them is Vinnie Kamaj. He was the first interview that I did on camera. He was looking for his father. His father was a window washer at the World Trade Center.
If you think your father might be out there somewhere, what would you want to say to him?
I want to tell him that we all miss him,
his little nephew, Luke, misses him, and that we're strong. We got hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaron, I've been talking to these families for 2 days now, and all of these stories are very much like this. People are just hoping that their relatives are out there somewhere, and they're begging us.
It was just so moving to hear from this young man how he was just searching and searching for his father.
If anybody see my daughter. He has a daughter, 7 months old.
I want him to come home.
We're not going to give up until we find you. We love you.
When you interview person after person who is missing someone who is so special to them, so important, fathers, mothers, sisters, wives, husbands, children, I don't know how you can help but cry.
This is part of the prelude to this prayer service that was called yesterday by President Bush when he said today would be a day of national prayer and remembrance.
A striking picture if you just look at the pews of, you see the former presidents, you see Al Gore there.
So many have suffered so great a loss, and today we express our nation's sorrow.
The most interesting moment of the day was after the president spoke and he came back and sat down in the pew, and his father reached across and just grabbed his hand, and it was sort of an attaboy, or good for you.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
I think people understood what he was saying, and you could see it in the reaction.
Do you want bin Laden dead?
I want him held. I want justice. And there's an old poster out west, as I recall, that said "Wanted, dead or alive."
We are one country today, committed, unified, in the pursuit to find and punish and obliterate those who committed that horrible act against this great nation.
The emotion here is rising dramatically. Everybody is moving into position.
Our heroes will now open the marketplace.
The determination not to allow terrorists to shut down our financial system was absolute. The markets today tumbling right from the opening bell. The Dow Jones Industrials plunging more than 650 points. Over the course of the next 5 days, $1 trillion in market capitalization was ripped out of our financial markets. $1 trillion.
What I remember most about it, the days and weeks and months after, is the smell. I don't know what that smell is. Jet fuel mixed with burning steel, mixed with human tragedy. I remember thinking how small the city felt, how sad the city was. Oh God, it was sad.
There were hundreds of funerals that were packed with New Yorkers who had never met these firefighters before, and I think that says a lot about the healing that went on here. We all wanted to feel like we were doing our part to say thank you.
Oh, say, can you see?
This is Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. Down below us, a Prayer for America memorial service here in New York.
What so proudly we hailed.
In the days since this attack, we have met the worst of humanity with the best of humanity. We pray for all of those whose loved ones are lost and missing. We pray for our children, and we say to them, do not be afraid. It's safe to live your life.
I became a New Yorker in a day. After 10 years of fighting it and not getting it, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with New Yorkers. I was so proud of how they were dealing with this terrible thing.
They were committed from the very beginning to deliver their city from the ashes and build it back up again, come hell or high water.
Ago today that American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Boston for Los Angeles and crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. There's been a remarkable spirit of unity in this country since the September 11th attacks.
My fellow citizens, for the last 9 days, the entire world has seen for itself the state of our union, and it is strong. Tonight, we are a country awakened to danger and called to defend freedom.
We have now learned that the U.S. Army is sending out deployment orders to units. It will involve various commando units, including the Rangers, the Special Forces, units that they call Special Ops.
It was another painstaking day for recovery workers at the World Trade Center disaster site as more victims are confirmed dead.
Our grief has turned to anger, and anger to resolution.
These terrorist cowards are not going to be allowed to break our spirit. In fact, they made a very big mistake.
Whether we bring our enemies to justice or bring justice to our enemies, justice will be done.
It was a perfect speech. I don't know that any president has ever given a speech where more of the country wanted him to succeed.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
President Bush is warning the Taliban that time is running out for them to surrender suspected terrorist mastermind Osama bin Laden.
Welcome to all the journalist community.
Afghanistan's Taliban rulers say they won't give up Osama bin Laden without evidence, if at all.
If infidels invade an Islamic country, jihad becomes the religious obligation of all Muslims. Osama bin Laden!
We strongly condemn this most brutal and horrible act of terror and violence.
Much unrest now in Pakistan over the government's alliance that it has formed with the Bush administration.
The hard work of building this international coalition continues today. The State Department
We've also had conversations with Portuguese Foreign Minister, the Saudi Foreign Minister, Moroccan, Tunisian.
Secretary Powell, more than 80 telephone calls, we are told, in the past 10 days to world leaders, his counterparts, other heads of states.
The Bush administration realized very quickly that they could not conduct a global war on terror or even a war in Afghanistan without building up a coalition.
I want to thank the Chancellor for his solidarity with the American people.
A coalition of sympathy and support that was a broad coalition that encompassed not just Western democracies, but also Muslim states.
What I am told by senior administration officials is the Pakistani government has promised to, quote, fully cooperate.
The Bush administration needed these countries, and it was remarkable how almost seamlessly and smoothly this incredible coalition was built up.
Our war is against evil, not against Islam. We don't hold any religion accountable. We're fighting evil.
There's an old rule in politics, whether you're you know, trying to sell a tax plan or whatever message you're trying to sell. It's repetition, 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 repetition.
We do not fight against Islam. We fight against evil.
Today we are releasing the photographs of 19 hijackers of the planes that crashed into the World Trade Center towers, into the Pentagon, and into the rural area in Pennsylvania.
You finally saw the faces of evil, people who carried out the most mind-boggling attack and assault on America, who had claimed so many innocent lives, looking into the eyes of these hijackers.
According to experts who've studied suicide bombing for a long time, these people aren't crazy, they're very rational, they've thought this out. And that's the scary thing, because it's very difficult to spot a rational actor out there who's willing to take his life to take out thousands of people.
The spirit of America is incredibly strong.
The administration, both from a psychological standpoint and from an economic standpoint, thought that it was imperative to try to make the case that it was safe to fly again.
We are serious about airline safety in America.
You had Bush himself go out to Chicago and do the rally at the airport.
Get on the airlines, get about the business of America.
We got the impression from listening to him that it was our patriotic duty to get back to work, to get in the air, to take that business trip, even though you really don't want to.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, ended its search and recovery efforts at the World Trade Center ruins today.
When FEMA announced officially that the search for survivors was over, it was a very sad time.
It's an inevitable stage. You have to reach it. But it is a terrible point to reach, because then you are admitting to the families, and they have to admit to themselves that that dream, that fantasy, that their loved one is going to be found unconscious, or maybe in a hospital room and unable to communicate, or maybe trapped in a void, that moment is gone.
Our troops maintain a level of readiness. We're in a prepare mode.
We train every day for war and pray for peace.
We're at a heightened state of security. We pride ourselves on being ready to go whenever the nation calls us.
We had a pretty good idea that the war was going to start probably on Sunday.
Senator Edwards, thanks for joining us. Welcome back. I was anchoring our Sunday program, Late Edition, and I was sitting there when they told me in my ear, get ready, you know, this war has begun. We have a live picture that we're showing from Kabul. We're seeing some flashes over there.
There was a big flash, and then there is firing into the air.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
Operation Enduring Freedom opened up on October 7th, like many other military campaigns. U.S. fighters and bombers taking out key Taliban targets.
One thing that the United States did realize it had to do right away was it had to get its own people on the ground, special forces, to help spot targets and direct the bombing to make it more lethal and more effective.
Now I'd like to show you some gun camera footage showing target destruction. In this case, the picture speaks for itself.
I've reflected on some of the questions that were posed at the last briefing about the speed of progress and questions about the patience of the American people. Today is November 1st. And if you think about it, the smoke at this very moment is still rising out of the World Trade Center. In the end, war is not about statistics, deadlines, short attention spans, or 24-hour news cycles. It's about will to see this through to certain victory.
Officials with CNN now confirming through officials with the Northern Alliance that the town of Mazar-e-Sharif apparently has been taken.
The Northern Alliance claims to have retaken the strategic city in a surprise move, which, if true, represents a dramatic setback for the Taliban.
I think people who really knew the Taliban, who really had experience in Afghanistan, were not surprised that the Taliban essentially turned tail and ran. They did not put up a fight.
This was our plan, not to enter the city, and we had reached to the outskirts of Kabul, as far as 6 kilometers north of Kabul last night. But then Taliban withdrew.
I arrived in Kabul the day after it had fallen. People who've been here during the day have seen all the people of Kabul out on the streets. The markets were bustling, shops were open again, music was being played again. I can't emphasize how important that is, because music was one of those things that was banned by the Taliban. And people felt just relieved that the Taliban had gone. The scenes of people joyous, you know, in the streets, women smiling, lifting their burqas shyly, children being able to be children again, men going to barbers and shaving off their beards that had been compulsory and regulation length under the Taliban. Of all the dramas in the Afghan war, the uprising at the prison, the fort at Mazar-e-Sharif, was perhaps the most dramatic. Here you had hundreds of Taliban and allegedly Al-Qaeda prisoners who'd been rounded up.
The incident began as some Taliban prisoners blew themselves up with some hand grenades, creating a scene of panic and chaos. After that, some of the Taliban fighters managed to seize some weapons from other soldiers or from the dead soldiers and start shooting all around them.
There's hundreds dead here, at least. I don't know how many Americans are here.
Mike Spann, seen here in a high school photo, was a CIA operations officer. He had been gathering intelligence from Taliban prisoners at a compound near Mazar-e-Sharif and was killed during their bloody uprising.
The death of the young CIA officer brought out into the sunlight for the first time the role that CIA paramilitary forces have played in this conflict. They develop relationships with very bad guys and try and glean intelligence from them.
And on that day in Mazar-e-Sharif, as we know, Mike Spann and his CIA colleague was questioning one of the recaptured prisoners, John Walker Lindh.
In a CNN exclusive, a shocking discovery in Afghanistan, an American believed to be serving in the Taliban regime.
I was a student in Pakistan studying Islam, and I came into contact with many people who were connected with Taliban. So I started to read some of the literature of the scholars and the history of the movement, and my heart became attached to them.
And of course, as we've been saying, the focus is on finding Osama bin Laden.
In terms of Mr. bin Laden himself, we'll get him running. We'll smoke him out of his cave. And we'll get him eventually.
History has shown that it's very difficult to get a single individual. In fact, in the past, the U.S. has tried to never build a policy around capturing a single individual because it's so difficult.
It was then believed by early December he was somewhere up in the Tora Bora region.
This has been a day of unbroken military activity by United States forces in the sky, air activity, B-52 bombers attacking the White Mountains, Tora Bora behind me.
What is the latest thinking now about where bin Laden might be?
Anybody's guess is the latest thinking.
We do not know with precision where he is, and that's the same status, same answer you've heard for quite a period of time on that.
By the end of 2001, all the major cities in Afghanistan had fallen. The Taliban had fled. But had they really? The Taliban are people who live in Afghanistan. They go back to their villages. They go back to their farms, to their families. The ideology is still there in many places in Afghanistan.
There is no doubt that the United States military intervention in Afghanistan has had a net positive effect for the people of Afghanistan. Their situation has not become perfect since, but it is incredibly and immeasurably better.
The Centers for Disease Control has just confirmed the diagnosis of anthrax in a patient in a Florida hospital. Based on what we know at this point, it appears that it's an isolated case.
We first found out about anthrax when we found out about the case of photo editor Robert Stevens, who worked at American Media in Boca Raton, Florida. And here was a man who had contracted anthrax, and no one could figure out where.
Some disease organisms are so tiny that a single drop of liquid culture may contain millions of them.
We hadn't seen a case of inhaled anthrax for 25 years.
Breathing in only a few could cause infection.
Anthrax was certainly one of those things that we absolutely glossed over in medical school, just one of those, here's what anthrax is, but you'll never really need to know about it.
So the news at this time apparently is not good for that man.
Bob Stevens, 63 years old.
Passed away at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
The big question for investigators, was it natural or was it bioengineered?
I remember getting a phone call early one morning, an anonymous source who called and said, FBI is coming in with a full team to the area to try to track this down. This is serious. Everyone was asked to give blood, be tested for the presence of anthrax. Long lines of people outside those offices as they were trying to find out whether they too were infected.
A number of people have said that they're scared, they're worried.
And so that's when things really started to grow.
This is all new to everybody, and it's changing second by second.
Good morning, I'm Andy Lack, I'm with NBC. I'm here with the mayor and with Bob Wright and Tom Brokaw and some of the mayor's key colleagues. And this morning, as many of you know now, we received a positive test for cutaneous anthrax for one of our colleagues who works on nightly news.
Our nation is still in danger, but the government is doing everything in our power to protect our citizenry. The American people need to go about their lives.
And I've worked with Tom Brokaw and Dan Rather and Peter Jennings, and so when it became clear that 3 media outlets had received either letters or something that contaminated the place, it's pretty darn scary.
We all did this thing in our minds. What have we touched? What have we opened?
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
At about 10:15 this morning, a member of my staff opened an envelope.
Welcome back. The U.S. Justice Department has just released copies of the letters with anthrax that were mailed to Tom Brokaw, the New York Post, as well as the Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle.
The FBI wanted to put the letters out before the public to see whether anyone else might possibly recognize the handwriting. The message was virtually the same in a number of them. Death to America, death to Israel, you die now.
What's the problem? My breathing is very, very labored. I don't know if I have been, but I suspect that I might have been exposed to anthrax. Work for the Postal Service.
Good evening, everyone. The anthrax attacks continue. Today, confirmation that 2 postal employees have died as a result of inhaling anthrax.
No one was really thinking, according to officials, that any of the spores could possibly have gone through the envelope and into the air to infect anyone. They were wrong, and they were very tragically wrong, because as they then came to learn, yes, people were infected, in that post office too. So while you had hundreds of people lining up on Capitol Hill being treated with antibiotics, that wasn't happening at the Brentwood Mail facility.
I can't believe the post office waited so long to have us come get checked out when people in Washington, thousands of people in Washington, are already being tested right off the bat.
A widening crisis. Traces of anthrax are found at more government buildings.
A second NBC employee has contracted cutaneous anthrax.
Traces of anthrax discovered at a CIA mail sorting facility.
A letter carrier has been affected.
Late today, a White House mail screening facility also testing positive for anthrax spores.
I don't have anthrax.
Well, this prompted incredible scares around the country because people didn't know whether they would be next. How many of these letters were out there? Would they get something in their mail that might be impacted with the anthrax too?
In the end, 5 people died, 18 people were confirmed infected, and whoever was trying to do this, if they were trying to kill lots of people, they failed miserably. And we proved to ourselves that this infection was something that we could get a handle on. We could treat people. 30,000 people were on antibiotics at one time or another, but we beat that.
Breaking news this evening. The FBI is warning of more potential attacks against the United States.
While not specific as to target, gives the government reason to believe that there may be additional terrorist attacks within the United States.
Traces of anthrax have been found in at least 4 more post offices.
A major scare at a Greyhound bus station in Philadelphia today.
Federal officials at the nearby 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant received what is being called a threat yesterday.
We're watching things at Hartsfield International Airport after a person apparently breached security. The airport has been basically shut down. There are thousands of people stranded there now.
Told Vice President Dick Cheney being kept apart from the president again, just in case the White House is a target of a terrorist strike.
The enemy is resourceful and ruthless. We have to assume there will be more attacks.
Officials were very scared that there would be another attack. And there was a long laundry list of different sectors that they wanted to protect. Aviation, it goes without saying, a lot of attention paid there. But they were also concerned about nuclear plants, about chemical plants, about the ports, which are hugely vulnerable, about the borders, which are very porous.
We urge Americans in the course of their normal activities to remain alert and to report unusual circumstances or inappropriate behavior.
Everybody is concerned about what's going to happen next.
You just feel so vulnerable now because you don't know what's going to happen, where it's going to happen.
A lot of people are afraid. They're scared.
It's overwhelming, the whole thought of it, the devastation.
In those days after the terrorist attack, we began to see terrorists on every corner and believe that they had an overwhelming ability to strike our nation.
In the name of Homeland Security, Attorney General John Ashcroft is asking law enforcement officials nationwide to interview some 5,000 people currently here on temporary visas.
We have in detention about 563 individuals who are being detained on Immigration and Naturalization Service items related to the events of 9/11.
Look out, look out!
A lot of people were being rounded up and being held virtually incommunicado.
Are there still, in your estimation, sleeper cells, Al-Qaeda sleeper cells roaming around the United States at this time?
We have every reason to believe that there are still people out there who came into this country for the purpose of trying to hurt us.
The whole point of a sleeper cell is to blend in, to become part of the population, leading normal lives, waiting for that point to be activated, and then carrying out their attack.
Osama bin Laden lashes out at the United States and the United Nations in a videotape broadcast today by the Arab-language TV channel Al Jazeera. On the tape, bin Laden claims the United States has no proof to justify its attacks in Afghanistan.
The White House reacts, and Condoleezza Rice calls in the heads of the television networks and asks for restraint. They were concerned that there might be secret messages transmitted to sleeper cells on what to do next, what to hit next, and so on, in these tapes. Time passes, and we haven't heard from bin Laden. And I get word, along with one or two other journalists, that there is another tape of bin Laden that has not been released. That it is a tape that bin Laden might not want released.
U.S. officials say that when you see this tape, you will have no doubt that Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda were the masterminds of the terrorist strikes on the United States 3 months ago.
There's something about looking at him, laughing at him. There's something about that, you know, the toadies who were in the room kind of egging him on, making him seem like such a hero because there were 3,000 dead Americans and that they didn't even think that building would collapse completely. It was beyond our expectations, he says. I did the calculations, he says. And you just, you know, you want to retch.
Aviation officials at Logan Airport saying that a man on board American Airlines Flight 63 was apparently trying to ignite explosives that were in his shoes.
We were lucky. He didn't get away with it. Some courageous passengers and crew members wrestled him down and stopped him.
Officials saying that the man in custody was carrying a British passport, identifying him as Richard Reed. They say he's about 28 years old.
We think it is very important since September 11th for America to remain on the highest possible alert.
We will take every possible action to make sure that this kind of injury and assault on America and on its freedom does not happen again.
The thing that is so scary is that it is impossible to protect all the things they need to protect.
We will be on alert indefinitely.
On September 11th, the Pentagon and the trade towers were burning. The Taliban were in power, and Afghanistan was a reasonably safe haven for terrorists.
We celebrate Christmas in a time of testing, with American troops far from home.
Today, the fires are finally out. The Taliban have been driven from power. Their leaders are on the run.
And this is a year we will not forget. Those who lost loved ones in the attacks on September the 11th and on the battlefield, they will remain in our prayers.
I want to tell you that my husband is a hero. Not because of the way that he died, but rather because of the way that he lived.
I found myself at a loss for words. I still do when I think about this. It was too enormous. The pictures didn't do it justice.
It shakes your very foundation. It shakes the core of who we are as people. We will never live with the degree of innocence any of us ever had.
We've had this sense for the whole of American history that the oceans protected us. We know that's not true anymore.
The first morning in New York, I came across a poster on a lamppost describing a man with brown hair and brown eyes, 36 years old, 5'11", 175 pounds, missing. And it was the exact description of me. The people in the towers could have been any one of us.
What I take away from this is that even in the most difficult, even in the most sorrowful of times, that the human spirit emerges and can truly make a difference. You know, this wasn't a scene where there was no hope or no love. There was a lot of love.
Nobody's going to forget the 11th. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you lived. You'll know where you were, and you'll know how you thought and what you thought.
In the wake of the terrorist attacks, America has truly come together.
Prayer services, blood drives, children collecting pennies. Americans responded with a spirit that underscores what's best about our country.
But we can do more. To help those families devastated September 11th, we should make certain a college education is available to each and every one of their children.
We can do that with your help.
For assistance or to make a donation, call this number.
Helping these families will show just how much we care.